So listen, I'm really excited about our panelists. We have Michelle Fro, Senior Vice President for Global Marketing Strategy and Sciences at MetLife, Rohit Mal, Chief Marketing Officer at Thrivent Financial, and then Benjamin Brunswig, Global Head of Partnerships at Shift Technologies. I'll turn it over to each of them to share a bit more about themselves momentarily. But I'm Saurabh Wahi. I'm a partner in Profit's digital discipline, and I co-lead our financial services practice. Profit, for those who aren't as familiar, is a digitally powered, creatively inspired growth and transformation consultancy. We take a human-centered lens to everything we do, and this is part of the reason why we are taking a customer-first view in our discussion today to understand how insurers might transform. I will be facilitating our discussion today with my colleague, Lindsay Schwartz. Lindsay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Lindsay Schwartz. I'm a Senior Engagement Manager and one of the leaders of our financial services vertical and practice based out of our New York office. So looking forward to talking to you all today. Michelle, do you want to give a brief introduction?
Sure. Just sorry, I had to hit the mute button there. Hi, I'm Michelle Fro. I am the SVP of Global Marketing Strategy and Sciences at MetLife. And I've been there about 3 years and love working across our global markets to help steward both MetLife's brand strategy, but also looking for and identifying insights, really define our customer channel and portfolio strategy so we can better deliver on customer needs and measure that impact that we have.
Wonderful. Rohit, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Rohit Mal. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Thrivent Financial. I've lived in a couple of different continents, had significant global role, cutting across the CPG industry in the past, Coca-Cola and Cadbury's. And then the last half of my career has all been in financial services, cutting across P&C insurance, life insurance, and banking. Some of those brands have been AIG, Selective Insurance, and Reliance Insurance. I've again spent time across both marketing roles as well as distribution roles, but my heart clearly lies in marketing. And here at Thrivent, my focus is on driving awareness and demand for our brand based on customer insights, and the buzzword that we're going to keep hearing, I guess, throughout today's conversation and pretty much outside at all points in time. And also building up a modern marketing organization with the capabilities to be able to fulfill those needs. Thank you.
Thanks, Rohit. That was great, and very excited to have your perspective. Benjamin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Benjamin Brunswig. I am the Global Head of Partnerships at Shift Technology. We're a B2B SaaS company focused on bringing AI solutions to the insurance industry. I'm based in New York City, and I've been at the company for about 2 years. My current role focuses on developing a partner ecosystem that spans a very wide array of players, all focused on the insurance value chain, but spanning consulting firms, software providers, and data providers. Prior to my role at Shift, I was working at another AI B2B SaaS company focused on financial services, where I was the VP of go-to-market strategy. And I initially started my career in management consulting. I worked for Capgemini and Bain & Company.
Fantastic. Really excited to get your perspective as well, Benjamin, today. So I'll turn it over to Lindsay in just a minute to give us a quick overview of what our research uncovered about customers, and then we'll do a quick flyover, and then we'll really like to sort of turn it over to our panelists to hear more about what their observations have been on our customers. So, and for anyone who's joining live, feel free to post questions to our panelists in the chat section. We'll be sure to pick up a few for a live sort of Q&A session right at the end of our webinar, the last perhaps 10 minutes or so. So Lindsay, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Let's jump in. So at Profit, one of our core beliefs is that in order to successfully transform, companies really have to start by understanding their customers, not only of today, but also of tomorrow. And so thinking about the insurance customer of the future, we used a few different inputs to define what they would be needing, who they are, and what they value. So first, we had focus groups with customers across a variety of age groups and generations, but in particular with a focus on millennials and Gen Z to really be forward-looking. Then we conducted secondary research, so wanting to understand what the market and also insurers and financial services providers are saying about how the needs of these customers are evolving. And then we also had a panel of profits, insurance, and transformation experts that helped guide our view on what the insurance customer of the future would look like and feel like. And so based out of all of this, we defined an archetype for Jamie, who to us represents the customer of the future in 2030. So who is Jamie? This is a customer in their early 40s. So thinking about the millennials of today continuing to age over the next 9 to 10 years. This is someone who has multiple jobs, so is considering the gig economy as a way of fundamentally earning their income. Someone who lives in a small city. So as smaller cities become more desirable hubs for tech, this is a place where Jamie is likely to live. And someone who works completely remotely, so works for digital businesses, but on their terms in a location that works for them. And then lives a very flexible lifestyle. So in addition to being flexible about the types of jobs that they have, they're also flexible about how they live. So rental agreements for their car and their home versus really anchoring on owning a lot of capital assets. And then opting to share data with insurers. So this is a customer that's comfortable sharing data with insurance companies and providers, but wants to know the value that they're getting and have complete control over what's shared. So that's a little bit about Jamie. So what does that mean for Jamie and her cohort of millennials and what they'll demand from insurers? So first, as I was saying, I need to be in charge of my personal data. This means she's willing to give up more of her data, but only on her terms and with her explicit permission, and making sure that she really understands what value am I getting for that data. So the more personal information I share, how is that adding value to me and my life? This also means that Jamie wants to feel that the products were created just for her. So individualized products, services, and experiences that show that the insurer really understands and is empathetic to Jamie and her needs. So this really adaptive and responsive relationship. And then Jamie needs to trust and verify the brands that they support. So this means Jamie wants to understand the products, so feel like they can trust because they really understand what they're purchasing, but also is willing to do the extra work and research to really verify that this is a company that they want to work with. And then fourth, I expect companies to follow me everywhere. So as I was explaining, Jamie works in a gig economy and has flexible work and living arrangements. So this means they want the insurance provider to follow them wherever they go, whether that's location, changing family setup, or changing jobs. The insurance provider should move with them. And then lastly, Jamie wants to be ensured that the company behaves equitably and ethically. So a company that completely aligns to her values and is transparent about what they support. So now it'd be great to hear from our panelists. Excuse me. Sarb, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, I'd love to hear from, Michelle and Rohit and Benjamin. What was interesting or surprising to you from either the research we've done or anything that from your own perspectives and as you've been looking at the future and thinking about customers in the future, anything that you've surfaced up as really important or prominent that jumps out as important learnings for the customer of the future? Michelle, would you like to share your thoughts first?
Absolutely, thank you. I think it really resonated that the customer of the future expects that their experience is going to be easy, right? And that they're going to be able to navigate and really understand all the ecosystems as they kind of develop. And of course, I think that expectations only really accelerated during COVID for all of us. But that really isn't the new news to any of us now, right? But so what's been surprising is how much customer expectations have increased regarding transparency for all financial services. And that's been something we've seen in our research. And this insight, really gives us a new level of understanding to the degree that customers expect transparency. And frankly, this could challenge the traditional intermediary model, as now the onus will be on us to help provide simplification and ways customers can easily understand what they own and how to use it. And it also shows that that intermediary model is going to need to evolve, because we've also seen in the future, or we haven't seen this, we predict that in the future, customers won't really need agents or brokers to help with their understanding of the products or even transactions that hopefully now will be able to be done smoother digitally. And so this is a real opportunity for their role, to be redefined almost as a life consultant and provide advice beyond insurance. And our data has shown that our customers really desire this. They want discussion at those critical moments and when they need to make decisions. And, frankly, one thing's for sure, these expectations aren't going to be static. They're going to continue to change. One of the areas we've seen a lot of change in is that people now expect us to be more flexible, as Lynn's talking about, than ever to respond to their needs. But we've also seen that flexibility need shift from more of a long-term need to a short-term need, and in some cases, even an ultra short-term need. So for example, on some of these insights in Korea, we launched some mini insurance products that, a very small premium will cover you for a year. So immediate needs with less commitment.
That's fascinating. Rohit, any thoughts from you?
So it's interesting that I'd say a combination of what I saw in the slides that you showed up with earlier on right now matches with a lot of what we're finding the customer segments that we're trying to attract are telling us, which is it's a dichotomy. On one hand, they're sensitive to sharing of data, right? And you can imagine all of us are to different and varying degrees. But at the same time, they and all of us also want personalized, relevant experiences, right? So how do you get this balancing act correct in this very connected world that we live in with so much data floating out there? And how do you do it in a way in which you don't end up appearing creepy? Like one of my previous CEOs was, you're like, oh my God, you're going to be able to follow these people around and you can show up here and there. And yeah, isn't that great, John? And he said, well, that feels and sounds very creepy, right? So how do we make sure that we get over the sort of experience that in some instances, I saw your example of Jamie saying, I expect companies to follow me everywhere. But does she really mean everywhere? Does she really mean every time? Does she really mean in every single activity? Maybe there's some sensitive areas that she wouldn't really want that. And then when we show up, it's going to end up being an unpleasant surprise. So I think it is a really interesting perspective that we need to bake into our planning moving forward.
It's a really, really interesting point. I think we've all felt the creep factor when we see ads following around us everywhere we go, when we search for one thing or the other. And I think it's really important, Michelle, to your point earlier also, that the expectation around transparency is increasing. At the same time, there's a greater degree of control, better tools, better ways that people can now exert control over their over their data and their privacy. What Apple is doing with iOS and providing deeply embedded data control tools, or what many of the new tools that limit what cookies can do and what they can track. Long way of saying that not only is this great expectation around transparency, now consumers have better tools to be able to follow through on what they really would like to control and ensure. That has important implications for insurers. Benjamin, you live and work in data all day long. From Shift Technology's perspective, how are you thinking about this idea of delivering exciting, automated customer experiences, using data, but at the same time doing it in a way that's respectful and ethical and serves against some of the needs that customers have voiced?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to echo what Michelle and Rohit have mentioned and answer your initial question around what sort of struck me in the report. I thought right away, kudos to the Prophet team for putting together a very comprehensive and insightful report. I thought it was great reading, and I really recommend that everybody reads it. So for me, obviously, taking the lens of a B2B SaaS company that's fully focused on delivering AI solutions to the insurance vertical, obviously the parts of the report that resonated the most, and frankly echo almost 100% of our client and partner conversations, it's the need for, or the expectation for on-demand, frictionless, instant experiences. I don't think this is a surprise to anyone. I think we live in that world already, but we can only, and as Michelle rightly pointed, the expectation has sort of gotten up a notch with COVID, and we can only expect that it's going to now become ubiquitous, right? People will be consumers will be expecting their insurance carriers to behave like a DoorDash or an Uber or an Amazon. There's really no reason that expectation for insurance carriers would be any different.
Right.
And that goes well beyond insurance, by the way, like probably across all financial services. So that obviously is the first, I think, striking point for me. The second one, I think, is, I'd love to get also the perspective of the panelists here and the attendees, but I also feel like there's a need and an expectation, and maybe tied to the comment that was made earlier around personalization and flexibility, to quickly switch from, hey, I just want to get this done quickly. This is not that complicated. Just give me an answer right away. To, well, this is actually a complex transaction. And maybe to talk to a human, because actually there's maybe an emotional context involved that I really have no patience for talking to a machine right now. And I think that's the ability to switch quickly from one mode to the other, and the expectation that our insurance providers will understand which is which quickly, so they can put us in front of the right interface. To me, that seems like an increasing expectation from customers as well. So obviously these resonated with me because, as from my vantage point as the head of partnerships for an AI company, I talk to my peers across the value chain every day, consulting firms that probably Rohit and Michelle and others work with, software providers, core system providers, and everybody across the value chain knows that AI is not just coming, it's already there, and it's already in many areas making an impact. I'd like to just pick an example to make it a little more tangible for everyone, but something that we see in our daily work with our customers and partners is a very important touch point that policyholders have with their insurance provider is obviously whenever there is a claim. And in fact, they would rather not hear about their insurance provider when there isn't a claim. But obviously, this is a key moment that's very emotionally charged, very high expectations around how the claim is handled. So, our view is that the claim process is a very good example to demonstrate the power of AI to really align with these expectations that we mentioned around personalized experiences, flexibility, and immediacy. And now what's interesting is that it's also very challenging, right? If you think about a claim and how it's processed, there's really an innumerable number of decisions that need to be made, starting from the very beginning. And each decision is actually somewhat complex, right? Even for simple claims, is the damage or the loss covered under the policy? Mm-hmm. Is the claim actually valid, or is it potentially fraudulent? Have the documents related to the claim been submitted, and are they valid, and or have they been forged? Do we need to send an expert on site to assess the damage? So all these decisions today primarily are made by humans, and there's a good reason for that. Is that there's a requirement around very high degree of accuracy of making these decisions, right? Because you cannot go wrong. Any one of these decisions need to be made accurately with 100%. Because if you don't make them accurately and you decide to deny a claim that actually is valid, you probably lose a customer. Yep. But if you decide to pay a claim that actually should be denied, you lose money. So you have to make the decisions correctly. And what we're seeing is that AI brings an incredible thrust behind driving the correct level of accuracy behind these decisions at every point of the claim lifecycle, while also ensuring that the requirements of the customers are being met for their claims being paid fairly and quickly. So to me, this is a very interesting examples of the impact of AI on the claim lifecycle.
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more, as a handful of disruptors in the space beginning to push claims to a real rapid fire way of addressing using artificial intelligence as the enabler, that more and more expectations are kind of moving into that direction. I have a couple of follow-ups, but I'm curious, Michelle, Rohit, from your perspective, any thoughts on some of the things that Benjamin talked about? Michelle, would you like to go?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think, Ben brings up a lot of really great points, particularly in some of the areas where maybe we're looking for some, he's talking about AI, helping with that smooth, seamless experience, which absolutely is going to be critical. But I also think that it can help us on the back end identify even more insights, right? And help us understand some of the connection points across the ecosystem where we almost can anticipate customer needs versus historically look back and see. So I think that's a very exciting place for us to lean into for the future.
From my point of view, if I take it back broader from just the claims experience, on one hand, I think all of us are probably finding digital technologies, COVID, etc., are meaning that the client of the future is much more of a validator rather than a delegator, given the fact that you've got so much information easily available to be able to take a look at before you even make your decision on how and where to proceed. So that's one very important component. And now when I'm going to go and look for this information to validate stuff before I decide on an actual purchase or decide on an actual engagement or conversation with someone, how is that showing up intelligently? How am I finding answers to the questions? What are the sort of tools that you're making available to me that pretty much narrows down what it is that I need to now converse about or engage with moving forward? And if AI comes back with irrelevant answers or not in line with what it is that I'm actually looking for, I'm going to start getting really upset, and then I'm going to just abandon it, and certainly that brand is going to have a negative impact on my view of them moving forward. But then we need to make sure that we are focusing, each of us, on that subcomponent of the larger audience who we are looking at targeting, and making sure that we are customizing our approach to that set, right? So as an example, in our instance, the future clients who we believe need a brand like Thrivent with the financial services purpose-based organization that we are, they want to make sure they're not missing out on any opportunities to optimize and improve their plan. Because again, if you're in your 40s, you probably already have a plan, you're probably already working with some sets of people, but you are wanting to make sure that it's not like, okay, that was done and I can forget about it. I constantly want to make sure I'm not missing out on anything. This whole FOMO piece exists in financial services as well. Again, the segment that we're looking for, they are proud of their ability to prioritize the things that truly add meaning to their lives. So again, you could have AI tools, but how are you going to add these nuances to what it is that these targeted set of people who we're trying to find, communicate to, and then bring them on are going to find that that's the sort of experience that they're getting, even as they're going through the process of understanding their options. So that now when they do decide to show up in front of a financial professional or, let's say somebody advisory on the phone, that experience ends up getting completed.
Rohit, I love what you said there about validating and optimizing. And that's exactly what we heard from the focus groups, that this cohort of people is willing to do the work, and they want to do the work to validate the information that they're receiving. And this notion of optimizing. So it's not a set it and forget it anymore. It's my life is continuing to evolve. So how can I work with the right company who will evolve with me? So both of those notions resonated with the customers we spoke to as well.
And let me just add on. Think about yourselves. Think about the people who you understand to be your customers, and then think about the life insurance industry or the insurance industry. In the United States, I don't know how many people know this, but there are over 6,000 insurance companies, right? 6,000, not 6. So now, if you already happen to be working with one or two, but you're reconsidering your plan, how are you going to make sure that you're going to be one of the 2 or 3 at max who they may be willing to also bring into their consideration set out of the 6,000 that are out there? What is it that's going to make sure you're going to show up and then you're going to resonate with them? And even then, they're unlikely to abandon their existing relationships, even if they're willing to try you out, until they believe they're getting the value that they need. And at that point in time, they may take a more drastic decision to look at existing relationships. So it is extremely important to make sure whatever we are offering up in that limited amount of time frame that we've got is relevant and gives them what they need, so that you can make sure that you're going to be relevant to them moving forward.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I want to probe a little bit on, Michelle, something you brought up earlier around this idea of providing more holistic solutions than just, sort of point insurance products. And Ben, you mentioned this idea of, moving from, individual transactions to more of an experience-based view. We've all seen the shift from more sort of protection-focused products and services to more, call it prevention-oriented products and services, where you're trying to mitigate risk, incentivize, for example, in life, like healthier lifestyles that can help reduce, the risk of chronic conditions. I'm curious, what's your view on the evolution of this trend, and how might insurers particularly begin to continue to sort of serve on this? Rohit, would you have any thoughts on that?
So I think there is no doubt that the insurance industry, I'd say the life insurance industry in particular, has been very, very product focused, right? Now, all of us understand moving from product focus to need state as an option, but obviously based off of in-depth, deep customer insight, so that you can now move to a deepening of a relationship based off of a basket of offerings that you can end up providing a client, so that you're giving them the best value, you're giving them one place where they can get much of what they're looking for, and they don't need to be jumping across different solution providers for different sets of solutions. But at the same time, that is very, very hard to do, both in terms of changing the culture and the way in which these really successful 100-year-old organizations have been working in the past and doing very well financially. But to be able to say the way in which we now are going to deliver our solutions are going to move to an advisory model or an advice-based model in order to be able to have these deeper relationships. It's strategically correct. It's easy to describe. It's very difficult to be able to actually deliver, both in terms of the type of digital experiences that need to be able to be brought to the forefront to make that happen, and then that translating into the real experience when you're now potentially engaging with the licensed individual who's going to give you your solution. If they're going to go back to just, okay, let me just give you this product and I'm pretty much done. It's like, hold on, you told me this nice fancy story. You gave me a lot of online experiences that made me feel really good. But now when I'm there with you, all you're trying to do is to get $5,000 from me every single year, instead of really trying to understand what it is that I need and give me advice across my entire sets of requirements. All of those pieces do need to be able to come together.
I love this point around culture. We're definitely going to come back and talk a little bit more about that. But before we do that, Michelle, any thoughts from you on this kind of evolution from protection to more prevention and risk mitigation?
Yeah, and I think it's really about what Rohit was just talking about, the value, right? So the inherent model that we have is that you purchase something and you wait to see what value you're going to get in the future, right? Yeah. And so, the thought of bringing real-time value now for people, I think it helps. It helps the overall value proposition, right? Because you're bringing services that they can use now, maybe for risk and mitigation or other things, but really could be just valuable to have those benefits right now. But the win for us, honestly, is one, it helps us differentiate, right, from other products in the marketplace. But the real win is it gives us another connection point with customers. And that is so important in a low touch category like this, to be able to have those really meaningful connection points to help build trust, but also relationships with our customers.
I love that point around connection. Benjamin, from your perspective, how might AI wizardry behind the scenes enable more of some of these touch points and connections that Michelle is talking about beyond, of course, claims is a powerful and important milestone in that experience journey. Are there other places that you're seeing it perhaps emerging on the horizon where AI could play a prominent role in creating more of this connection touch points with customers? What are your thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, there's many other areas. I tend to be a bit more focused at Shift Technology. We tend to be a bit more focused on the claim side, but I'm certainly aware of other areas. And sort of also building on what I think Rohit and Michelle mentioned earlier, that creating that connection with a prospect and a policyholder is absolutely key. But you kind of earn the right to do it when you come in at the right time with the right message, with real value. And certainly I think AI can help enable that. We're actually working with a big CRM provider that I won't name, but to essentially help agents drive what we call next best action on AI models. And so it's basically leveraging techniques like machine learning and statistical analysis to essentially just connect the dots. So identify when the policyholder reaches out with a particular need or goes through certain life stages. Well, it's probably the right time to approach them with a particular value package that they're likely to find interesting and will actually find valuable. So there's a lot of opportunities around upselling, cross-selling, and really connecting the dots between sort of the demographic data that's available, the life stages that the policyholder is going through, and what value package we want to bring to the policyholder.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, I think this is a really good sort of pivot point to begin to talk a little bit more about how can organizations, insurers, begin to transform. Frankly, most insurers are in some stage or some stage in the journey to transformation. So let's talk about how do these learnings begin to affect how you think about the organization differently and perhaps more importantly, transforming the organization. We've unpacked some really important sort of customer expectations. I'd be curious to understand, how is your organization beginning to transform to respond to these evolving customer expectations? And perhaps what might be the most important priorities that are sort of surfacing up, bubbling up as really sort of mission critical to position the organization well for the future? Michelle, perhaps I'll start with you this time. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it is definitely important, I think, to define those key strategic transformation priorities. And I do have some thoughts about, the what in those areas to share, but I think it's also very important, just as important, to define how you're going to go do that in the organization. So, for instance, it's imperative that we understand what matters most to our customers so that we can truly transform our relationship with them, just because we're saying how important that is, right?
Right.
And, from all of the insights that we get, there are a lot of drivers to a relationship, such as trust or these experience moments we've been talking about, that give us insight on how we might need to transform our model, maybe to be more transparent or to be more of a pull versus a push model, or even innovating to a new insurance model, like we were talking about, that's more about holistic solutions and not just products. And of course, I think technology is going to help us transform in all of those areas. So for us, we know that when we have stronger relationships with customers, it really positively impacts the business, and customers wanting to stay longer with us, buy more by cross-selling or upselling. And then ultimately, the best growth engine is for them to refer us to others. And bring in new people and new customers to have relationships with. So the how in which you engage the organization around that transformation priority, like relationships for us, really is just as important. I mean, first you have to ensure you have a very clear shared goal across the enterprise, because that helps engage all functions and business partners to focus on transformative solutions, because, you know, these are long-standing challenges that we have. And I think we've proved time and time again, one group alone cannot solve them, right? And then when you have a shared goal, that visibility of the shared goal across the whole organization makes us focus as one team who are obsessed with delivering the customer and really meeting that goal.
Michelle, one follow-up on that. You mentioned that one team can't be responsible for this, right? Everyone needs to be working together. So what are some ways in which you're starting to foster more collaborative working across lines of business, markets?
Well, there's definitely, you know, some of these insights and actions are best done at the local level. Because our businesses are very local, and those relationships are best held there. And so we do have cross-functional customer teams, councils, if you will, of across businesses, across functions, et cetera, at that local level, who come together, look at these insights, look at the data that we have, and also have a shared goal to focus against, and, you know, really are using agility and empowering teams to go off and problem solve those things. So definitely a lot of focus at the local and huge improvements and wins. But then we also foster and nurture communities that are across the globe and across markets, so that we can share best practices and actually raise hands to say, we have no idea how to solve this one. And maybe, you know, we need a task force and a pilot to go figure that out. So that's been really energizing too, to kind of put some experts into one market to help really solve that big challenge, with an eye to creating approaches for the other markets to take on.
That's really fascinating. Rohit, I know you've led transformations across a few different contexts. I'm curious both on the what around priorities, and I love Michelle's push around how as well. What are your thoughts on that, those two areas?
So firstly, I would echo a lot of what Michelle has just said. I'd like to add further context to it. I do want to reference a survey that was conducted by one of the competitive consultant firms like Profit, who have come back with a very scary statistic, which is only 35% of the organizations who set out to undertake a significant transformation journey actually end up succeeding in what their original plan was, right? So we're not talking about incremental transformation, a firm that's already modernized and then, you know, keeps transforming forever, which is what we all need to reach, rather than these big giant steps. But a lot of the life insurance industry, I think companies there have been so successful that they haven't really needed to make those changes in the past from a financial perspective, but they clearly see the writing on the wall, and now they need to make this, you know, significant step up, after which hopefully things will not need to be in a scenario where you're doing giant transformations on an ongoing basis. So now how do you make sure that you're going to be one of those 35% who are going to succeed versus those who are not going to do it? I'd reiterate that having this big, bold vision is critical, because how else are you going to get everybody inspired? How else are you going to make sure it's clear and simple enough that it resonates with everybody and they understand it and they all want to go after it because it's that inspiring. The other part is extremely important, which is to say having senior management alignment and organization-wide buy-in is also critical. And if that comes only as a top-down approach versus the process that was followed was to make sure significant amount of diversity of thought has been brought into the process. So at the end of the day, you may not choose to take my suggestion, but I had the opportunity to talk about it. I had the opportunity to understand why that was not as important as something else. And now I bought into, what we have all identified as the most important pieces to be able to go after to drive that transformation. Now you've won me over, right? And now I'm completely committed to doing what it is that is needed and bring my team along with me to assist with making that happen. So the alignment of the executive leadership team, along with organizational-wide buy-in driven through diversity of thought, extremely critical. The other piece I think that we're all probably starting to learn is that, yes, the plan needs to be bold, but you need to be able to approach it through bite-sized, appreciable pieces that you constantly keep delivering in shorter timeframes to be able to demonstrate significant movement forward. That makes everybody continue to feel confident with what's happening, allow for pivots to happen based on changes that might be necessary, but avoid these massive 2-3 year type of programs that you're only going to discover at the end of that, whether you stayed within cost, you delivered what was expected, and then who knows, maybe a lot of requirements have really changed in between. And I think, for example, our new chief digital officer and technology officer who's joined is very clear about saying we still need to complete that transformation, but we can now approach it in a different way, which is going to constantly mean the investments that are going in upfront are the ones that will get us our returns back most quickly, and that continues to help with the funding of what we need to be able to do moving forward. Michelle mentioned the fact that you've got to be able to have the maturity to continually refine the plan based off of learnings and customer insight that you will keep discovering more and more of, because unfortunately for us, that's not static. Everybody's changing in the way in which they behave and their expectations based on so many external stimuli, that if we're not going to be able to say, well, we've got our system set up to constantly take those fresh inputs, to relook at our plan and then make those changes, then again, we're not going to reach where it is that we need to reach, because the place we started off thinking we needed to reach no longer is the destination that we should have been planning to reach on. I saw a question from Ilya Filipov in the chat, talking about how do you fit the legacy side of the business in a changing consumer preferences for product design and engagement. I'm just going to reference that at a high level here, because again, some organizations take the stance that unless I clean up my entire backend and modernize that, what's the point, right? The front end is not ready to be enough to deliver. But then you're talking about tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars often, especially when you're looking at legacy policy admin systems and claims admin systems, etc. And again, that has to be done. There is no option. You don't just want to have this lovely, shiny object, great marketing messages, great personalization and targeting there. But then when you actually are with us, we've got this sort of hamster on a wheel that's furiously pedaling to try and keep up with the experience that we've committed to the client in the front end. But yet it goes back to saying, so how are you going to chunk this up into pieces that will get delivered at the same time and demonstrate progress moving forward? You can't do one or the other, and you frankly can't do one before the other. You've got to be able to sequence them appropriately so that you're moving forward in the smartest way possible. I'm sorry, a little bit of a long answer, but I'll stop there.
Thank you. And anyone who's tuned in, please feel free to continue to add more questions. We'll have some time to address them. I was going to ask a question to Benjamin, but Lindsay, did you want to say something real quick?
Oh, I was just going to say, I love to hear the notion of the bite-sized pieces that Rohit was mentioning to attack the transformation. And then similarly, Michelle, as you were talking about the pilots, when we need to test and learn about something, this notion of not everything has to be such a big effort. We can try and learn as we go.
So I think those are great points. Let's come back to that in just a minute. Ben, I know you've got a front seat view of transformation across multiple different organizations, across insurers. And in some ways, you're also an enabler, especially on the technology side, to drive some of this transformation. What are your observations on what are the priorities that are emerging up very frequently as critical, and also addressing this point around how are organizations equipping themselves to be able to drive that change forward? What are your thoughts?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, I'd like to try to avoid repeating what Michelle, the excellent points that Michelle and Rohit made, which I agree with 100% of those. The requirement around customer insights and sort of infusing those across the organization, the fact that the writing is on the wall, and so indeed there is a sort of an imperative to start, but at the same time, as Rohit pointed out, that it's it's got to be done in ways that ensure the organization is building confidence that this is working, and there are quick wins that have demonstrable impact and ROI all along the way, as opposed to multi-year programs that can end up disappointing in the end. So I agree with all of those points. It's a very strong foundation for me trying to just add maybe my perspective on top, which would be, I think we get involved in a lot of claims transformation programs. And indeed, as Rohit mentioned, there are components around just core system modernization. So I won't go too much into that because that's sort of something that needs to happen. But I'd say even outside of that, what we are seeing is that the customers that are sort of very sort of at the cutting edge of thinking about where they want to be 10 years from now are really thinking about their data strategy and really being very thoughtful about sort of developing, I'd say, almost like a partnership between the sort of the core domain expertise that exists within their organization and leveraging either emerging capabilities within their organization around data management and data analytics, or leveraging these capabilities from the market, from vendors like Shift and many others who are real experts within the sort of the AI and data analytics space. So to me, I'd say one of the key points that I think is very important. I think we probably all have read news about or news stories about big AI programs, and I won't name any names there, but that end up sort of failing or delivering under expectations. But to me, the key insight from that is that for any AI program to actually be successful, it needs to be very deeply rooted in the business need and very focused on bringing the best sort of a deep understanding of the domain expertise that exists within the organization, like literally having detailed meetings between claim handlers and knowing the fact that, for example, they've been doing their job very well for a certain number of years or decades and know their space extremely well, and marrying that up with a sort of a data analytics vendor, for example, or an internal team that has a very deep understanding of the business. And so I'd say the marriage of the two, or the partnership between domain expertise and data analytics and data proficiency, is really the key for success. And it's on that basis that I think, to Rohit's point, you can then start prioritizing use cases that are kind of short-term focused and really can have demonstrated impact on ROI.
Yeah, it sounds like really the key to, if I was to draw a bit of an analogy, the key is to, how do you swallow this giant remit around a broad scale transformation? The answer is take small bites, take targeted, small, purposeful, very clear bites with very clear outcomes. Lindsay, let's go to the two questions you talked about.
Yeah, sure. So two of the questions that we're getting from the audience. One, what's been the biggest challenge or roadblock as you think about adapting for the customer of the future? What's the thing that's keeping you up at night, or you're getting calls from the team that you're just really not sure where to get started or how to handle? Rohit, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. So from my point of view, this would probably be fairly uniform across any organization attempting to transform and move from a product focus to a client-centric one, which is to say, how are you baking the client needs and insights and learnings into every critical decision that you're making? It just sounds so obvious, right? I mean, fine, we all get it. Why don't we just do it? Moving to a level where that is getting discussed upfront at every single leadership meeting, every single execution meeting, and that's being referenced, has taken our organization, I would say, close to a year and a half to 2. But I can now see that happening. You can see that in every meeting you're going into. Who's the target audience? What is it that we're trying to solve for them over here? How is that baked into what you're proposing? And if you can't explain that, go away, come back again once you're ready. But it's taken a long time because we don't default to that way of thinking since we've been successful with a product focus, in the past. The second part of it is going to be to make sure, even though we come in with that and then we start moving forward and solutioning for that, that we constantly have our check-in points to say, well, what's the latest that we've learned and heard, and what are the changes that we might need to be making based on what we've heard. So again, it just sounds so logical, inserting that into your process every step of the way and making that a way of life. Now we're going to move to the second part of the challenge, and that's what we've got to be able to demonstrate that we're doing moving forward. So I would say out of everything, that would be the most critical.
Great. Michelle, what about you? What are you seeing at MetLife as the biggest challenge for transformation?
Well, and I don't know if it's specific to MetLife necessarily, as Rohit was saying. I think all of those are very fair. I think overall, for all of us as leaders, it's the challenge is, how do we enable and empower our teams to respond to these future customer needs and expectations when you're trying to deliver results today. So it's a little bit of that short-term, long-term kind of tension, that we sometimes have. And I think, it's our responsibility really as leaders to figure out, how do you empower your teams for them to actually have some mind space to experiment with new solutions that could meet those needs and inspire them in working in new ways, with agility, etc., so that it does feel iterative and that we're not trying to boil the ocean, but we're allowing the time to take small steps of improvement.
Great. Ben, what are you seeing both at Shift and with the partners that you're working with?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I think, first of all, I'd like to echo what Michelle and Rohit said, and also maybe empathize with the difficulty of their jobs, that, balancing these competing priorities. These are really big jobs and difficult ones. So, me sort of standing in a different spot of the value chain, I'd say it's probably a little easier for us. But we empathize very deeply, and I think the challenges, I think, I'd say, there's a number of them. Where I think we could really work very successfully in a partnership with our clients and other partners in the value chain is bringing our sort of domain experts together with our data experts to quickly identify use cases and prioritize them, so that we can demonstrate that there is a way to improve. It could be incremental improvement or more transformational, but being very open, across all players within the value chain around, hey, if we want to demonstrate success, these are the areas where we're most likely to see success. And this is not easy, by the way. It's what I've learned, being in the insurance industry over the last couple of years, is that there's actually a lot of variations from one local market to another, one line of business to another, one type of target customer to another. And so there's hundreds, if not thousands, of potential use cases that that we could be focusing on to impact transformation. But starting with the right ones and having honest conversations about where to start, I think, is the key.
Well, we are almost at time. I wonder if there's time enough for squeezing in one last thought. Michelle, Rohit, Benjamin, from your perspectives, any final thoughts or words of advice to somebody who's part of our attendees or watching this in a recorded way on how to perhaps accelerate or jumpstart change in their organization? Anything that you've learned from your perspective that you might want to share?
I would just say that I think in my instance, I'm really fortunate to be a part of an organization where our CEO is completely laser focused, and I mean it, laser focused on the segment that we believe can be best served by us and would need our solutions, and is now driving that down the chain, which means we are all motivated to make sure we're showing up with our ability to come out with our pieces of the puzzle getting solved that's going to be able to make this transformation a reality. And I would encourage anyone in any organization, no matter what role you're playing, to say this has always been the agenda item for most organizations for the last, I'd say, decade at least. How much of that is lip service versus how much of that are you going to be able to help influence, bring to the forefront, and truly lead into a cultural shift that's necessary in order to be able to drive this way of working forward and make it part of your DNA. That is the most critical. The marketing pieces, the technology pieces, the product, all of that will fall into place if we can get that piece right. That's most important.
Michelle?
I would say bring the outside in. Look for ways to look outside of your small competitive set. Sometimes we get very focused on winning with a small group. And I think rightly so, as Ben talked about earlier, our customers are customers of a lot of different companies and industries out there. And there's going to be a blurring of expectations from any company. Not just because you're an insurance company, this is my set of expectations. And so, like Rohit, I have a lot of other industry experience in CPG and tech, et cetera. And it always, it doesn't surprise me, but I think it surprises others sometimes, when you're really trying to solve the same customer challenge, just in a different setting. And so you really can bring in on how other companies or who have similar challenges, but maybe not in your competitive set, have solved those.
Wonderful. Ben, any final parting thoughts from you?
Well, I think from my perspective, I'd say just a reflection on the state of the broader technology landscape, that now with SaaS models, APIs, and a whole bunch of other technologies, the cost of starting an innovative project sort of is going down. And so there's many more opportunities for organizations to trial and test new things. And so if you're sitting, whatever organization you're in or whatever role you have, there is really more opportunities than ever before to try new things and even combine different sort of technology assets together. Ask your technology vendors to partner together to achieve your business goals or whatever your goals may be. So I think that would be my sort of advice and recommendation, is just leverage the technology that's available out there.
More accessible than ever before. Well, we are at time now. Michelle, Rohit, Benjamin, I want to thank you for sharing your incredible and insightful perspectives today. And I also want to thank our webinar participants who joined us live and who shared their questions. I hope you found this discussion insightful and useful. If you have any follow-up questions, or if you'd like to unpack more learnings from this conversation, feel free to reach out to the Profit team. We're happy to field any additional questions, and we'll summarize some of these and share them back out. And as I mentioned before, if you'd like to dive deeper into the research we did on insurance custom of the future, you should be able to download it from the link that Michelle from our team posted in the chat. Thank you again, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.